Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to you for joining us this morning. We're delighted that you can be with us on this, our first Methodist Women in Britain online conference, which is a bit of an adventure, but we will share it together as we go along. So wherever you are and whatever you're involved in otherwise today, you are very welcome, and we're delighted to have you here.
And we hear some words from the prophet Isaiah from chapter 42, beginning at the first verse. Here is my servant, the one I support. He is the one I chose, and I am pleased with him. I've put my spirit upon him, and he will bring justice to all the nations. He will not cry out or yell or speak loudly in the streets. He will not break a crushed blade of grass or put out even the weakest flame. He will truly bring justice. He will not lose hope or give up until he brings justice to the world, and people far away will trust his teachings. God, the Lord, said these things. God, who created the skies and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and everything on it, who gives life to all people on earth, to everyone who walks on the earth. And God says, I have called you to do right, and I will hold your hand and protect you. You will be the sign of my agreement with all people, a light to shine for all people. You will help the blind to see. You will free those who are in bondage, and you will lead those who live in darkness out of their prison. Amen. And let's pray together. Loving and gracious God, we invite you to be with us this weekend, and we thank you for your presence among us. At the beginning of this new day, we praise and worship you in thanksgiving for all that you are, all that you have given to us, and all that you have done for us. We offer to you this day all that we are, all that we have to give, and all that we do in your name. Inspire our thinking, guard our speaking, and guide our doing as we meet together this weekend. God, who fathers and mothers us, in you the unloved and discarded are cherished, the unvalued and devalued are honored. Holy Spirit, who feeds us and sustains us, in you the outcast and the pariah are restored, the hopeless and the helpless are held. Jesus Christ, who saves us and guides us, in you the lost and the abandoned are reclaimed, the voiceless and the oppressed are championed. May we hear the cries of those you love. May we stand together in unity and work together with compassion until all your children know your love and feel your worth. Amen.
So we come now to introducing Imelda. Imelda is based in Albania and has been there for a number of years now. I first got to hear about her work when a friend of hers moved to Southampton a few years ago and joined our district group. And we ended up learning about the work that she was doing to train youngsters and to help those rescued from trafficking, and we set up a partnership with her NGO RENATE, which it stands for Religious in Europe Networking Against Trafficking and Exploitation. Imelda is CEO of that organisation, and she has built it from the ground, working, as I say, to prevent young people from becoming trafficked, as well as supporting those who have been rescued from trafficking situations.
Well, first of all, I feel quite emotional and overwhelmed with being in front of such an amazing group of women from the Methodist Church, and it is truly a privilege and an honour, and it's a great gift, and I feel very grateful indeed this morning to have this opportunity. In talking to the core group of the Methodist Women in Britain, it was kind of thought that maybe I'd divide the inputs into 3 themes. And one is an introduction, and also an introduction to my own vocation and mission into this work against human trafficking. And secondly, in the second input, to focus on the actual real day-to-day experience right across the world of human trafficking and the issues for the survivor and the victims. And then the third input is basically centering on causes and solutions and our way in which we can participate in this mission. So let's just go step by step on our journey over this day, indeed, centering on human trafficking, and tomorrow in worship and prayer as we continue the theme. In beginning this input, you can see this wonderful slide together with Hope on the Way, which is our theme for this weekend. And the hashtags that are written there are those of Renata that we keep in our minds all the time. Stop the demand, break the chains, end the cycle together. And so let's take on board this corporately as we begin this journey together this weekend. I was reflecting on your wonderful church, the Methodists, and it took me back to my mission in the Clarences with Sister Philippa for 16 years, actually, in a council estate of 3 generations unemployed and 3 generations without any kind of church presence, where we were called. And here we formed an ecumenical team because Philippa and I knew it couldn't be done without that wonderful support. And the Methodist ministers in Billingham over those 16 years were just extraordinary people. Peter was the main minister throughout that time, and his wife Kathleen, who are now in York. And I just want to say that worshipping with them on our estate ecumenically and going to the Methodist Church to worship with them was a very deep interior conversion for me. And so I come with you as sister today, sister Methodist, sister Catholic, sister, part of the family, if you like. And so in that history, if you like, of Methodism in my life, I was considering about John Wesley and Charles Wesley over this time. And I suddenly came to understand that, in fact, John Wesley lived at the time of Wilberforce. And as we know, Wilberforce was the public face of combating slavery in that time. And so I looked up John Wesley's letters. And I want to begin, and then we'll move on quite fast now, but I want to begin my input today with a letter from John Wesley to Wilberforce to set the scene. And this is John's words. These are John's words. Dear Sir, unless the divine power has raised you up to be as Athanasius contra mundum, Athanasius against the world, I see not how you can go through your glorious enterprise in opposing slavery, that execrable villainy, which is the scandal of religion, of England, and of human nature. Unless God has raised you up for this very thing, you will be worn out by the opposition of men and devils. But if God be for you, who can be against you? Are all of them together stronger than God? Oh, be not weary of well-doing. Go on in the name of God and in the power of his might, till even American slavery, the vilest that ever saw the sun, shall vanish away before it. With this spirit, we walk with Wilberforce, we walk with John Wesley into this journey with the survivors and the victims against human trafficking today. Thanks, Matt. So here we have the definition from the Treaty of Palermo as to what is human trafficking for those who have not yet read this basic document. So the use of violence, threats or coercion, the transporting or recruiting, harboring of people in order to exploit them for purposes such as forced prostitution, labor, criminality, marriage or organ removal for financial gain. I illustrate this with a little story. Muriel is a friend, a young girl, whom I discovered crying in church 2 years ago. She was from the Philippines. She is from the Philippines. I discovered through sitting with her the most horrendous life experience in Tirana, where she had been tricked by a false illegal labor agency, offering her work and the means to get to that place of work. In fact, it was slave labor. She was in the most appalling conditions, 9 of them in one room, bed top and tail, morning till night, shifted from one hotel, not really hotels, gross places, from one part of the country to another, and broken. So violence, threats, coercion, transported, recruited, harbored, exploited for purposes, in her case, of labor, false labor, slave labor, a commodity sold across the world. And she was then, thankfully, we were able to form partnership with my colleagues in Tirana, and we were able to quietly and cleverly, really, and that's what happens when you get the police and your own colleagues around such a person, to keep them safe, safeguarded and protected with human rights law behind them, to a shelter where she was for a year. And now she is on her way to freedom. She has spent a year recovering. She's back in the Philippines. I'm still in touch because she's still not quite free. She still has not been given her reintegration package. She's in very, very poor conditions in the mountains. Her parents are elderly, they have little money. So you can see the scenario. This is very real. We're now going to watch a film, and it's again an interview with a traffic victim. I wanted to center it on the theme at the beginning, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Matt.
Blessed with natural beauty, but the centre of a dark trade, Albania has over 2 decades built up a brutal industry with human beings the commodity.
I hate them, and I want them to get the punishment that they deserve.
Saya, now still a teenager, was just 14 when she was sold into a trafficking ring by a man she thought was her boyfriend. She was forced to sleep with several men a day and tells of a bewildering and terrifying world of abuse in which she could trust no one.
There were the other girls there too, but I did not talk to them, because you could not tell who was connected to whom. We were terrified. They would beat us up and not let us go out. To be controlled by someone, to be used as I was, is totally degrading.
She lives here in a refuge for trafficked women in the south of the country. But these are schoolgirls, and some already have children of their own. All have escaped their traffickers. Saya helped put some of hers behind bars. Several convicted traffickers are held here in Korcha High Security Prison. Last year, 18 people were sentenced. Some here are serving 20 years or more. The Albanian authorities let us talk to one of them. Fatos Kaplani was sentenced to 15 years for trafficking children to Greece and forcing them to work as prostitutes or beggars. What made him, a married man with his own children, commit such a crime?
It was the time that everyone was doing that kind of thing.
You used a child in order to earn some money. Isn't what you did entirely wrong?
It's terrible. What if that were my child and someone did that to them?
He faced justice, but Albania's been criticised for a lack of prosecutions, and there are concerns over police collusion. Some senior figures question whether trafficking is a real problem, but the official line is that there are systems to deal with it.
It's not a big concern as used to be many years ago. We have a system in place that we're working, and it's not an increasing trend. It is a phenomenon that is kind of constant, but it has to be tackled properly and to make always all the structures working together.
But it's away from the modern capital city that all too often traffickers find their victims.
Albania remains a poor country, and in many areas a woman's role is still seen as being in the home. Young women in small-town Albania can be easy prey for groomers, seduced by promises of a better life.
That better life is invariably outside Albania, but Anna never dreamt of her fate.
He said he was looking for a girl just like me and he wanted to start a family.
She is now in a safe house in the UK, duped into leaving home and then sold into prostitution. She weeps throughout our interview, but insists she wants to tell her story.
I was somewhere underground. I had no sense of the world around me. They would not let me see. I entered the building blindfolded.
And you were raped every day?
Yes, every day.
Many men?
Yes, many.
Anna is now supported in this safe house run by the Salvation Army. She has a baby, which gives her a reason to carry on. Her story should trigger alarm in authorities here and across Europe. A broken life caused by a brutal crime. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to suggest that we have a very short, we won't have 5 minutes, we'll maybe have a minute for you to just move into your inner spirit and just touch how you're feeling and let it go into the hands of God, who holds us all, and also the young people who are trafficked and are always going to be cared for somehow in the hands and mind of our loving God. So what was it in my life that led me to this moment today? And I think that we can all say, when we go back to the roots of our family, just like going back to the roots of John Wesley, that roots give us a profound nudge all the time into the will of God in our lives. And from a little girl, which you can see me sitting on the piano there, I was the 10th of 12 children, that we were encouraged, even since I can ever remember, to care about other people. So as a tiny tot, I was in a family choir, and we would go to the hospitals and we would sing, especially on Christmas morning in the maternity wards, for the mums that were feeling a bit desperate being away from their families on such a day. And I would go snow sweeping as young as 5 and 6 with my older brothers and sisters to raise money for Africa, was what we did, and for the children who had been orphaned. So this was my history. And, you know, quite a young age, I lived a life. I had a serious sense that maybe I was moving into gymnastics and to go to college for remedial gymnast profession. But something nudged me at the very early age to become a sister. And I think it was really because I was so heavily engaged in social justice when I was 17, through friends and church and so on. And the sisters that were educating me in Nottingham were Mary Ward sisters. And I loved their humanity, their joy, which was expressed in just every day in the classroom and going on field trips, because I was then studying A-level geography, history and English. So, you know, I was out and about with my studies. And Mary Ward, born, as you see here, in 1585, was a woman who was way ahead of her times. And she knew in her own call that her particular inspiration was based on the Ignatian charism, but also a call for women to education and to give women in those days the equal opportunities to men, which the church didn't like and the world didn't like. So thank you, Matt. So she did travel around Europe, set up her communities, lots and lots of followers, but the church did not like it, and she ended up being declared a heretic and was imprisoned. And eventually, you know, the Pope agreed she wasn't a heretic and apologized, but she died in ignominy, really, in England, back in England, in York, and was buried in an Anglican grave because it was still the time of the Reformation. It was civil war in Britain under Cromwell, and a massively dangerous time for Mary Ward to be on mission with her women underground, if you like. And during that time, she had this amazing vision, and it was called the vision of a just soul. And there were 3 aspects to this, which add to the Ignatian spirit of discernment and following God's will. And there were freedom, justice, truth, and joy. Thank you. And this is very, very intimately close to the mission ultimately we were called into by the Archbishop of Tirana, the mission against human trafficking, because of course, everybody that's humanly trafficked is denied human rights, is denied their freedom, denied their ability to be heard for their truth, and they're not given justice. So if you like, in this mission, we are fulfilling the call of Mary Ward of the Holy Spirit to work with all these totally suppressed human beings to find the freedom to be in the image of God, what they were born to become. And that is the core spirituality and calling of anybody following the Mary Ward charism, with the gospel as the underpinning of all of this, because of course it is the mission of Jesus. So freedom, yes, to be who you are, to be able to speak your truth. Thanks, Matt. And justice, to seek justice, which is in this context, the vision of, in the mind's eye, to experience the original call of God in the creation of humanity, to be totally free and open to follow God's will, to that total freedom and joy, which is God's desire in us. Thank you. And the sincerity, it's through the manner, the walk of truth. Only in truth will we be set free. And that is the words of Jesus. Thank you. And of course, from all that, in freedom, we experience joy, even in the most painful and tear-filled mission against human trafficking. There is that deep, deep inner joy, knowing that you're doing God's will. Thanks. And the major influences, Hillary's already mentioned about the UK, and I have followed that through with the wonderful experiences there of people totally denied their freedom, justice and sincerity in UK, very filled with drug addiction and terrible mental disturbance from poverty and denial of citizenship in Britain, really terrible. Kenya, living with the Kipsigis tribe, where genital mutilation was normal, a terrible passport to the father and the male part of the tribe, finding their status while the women were denied their human right for a marriage in a normal manner. And then into Albania, where we were called by the Archbishop into human trafficking, all of them deeply, deeply leading you to greater humility, knowing that only with God can you find quiet rest. And those are the words of Mary Ward. Thank you. And so we're just like a lump of clay. Ultimately, you know, in the center of us all, we're nothing. It is God, as we allow God's power and love to come into our central force and being, that we let God form and direct and plan our lives little by little. So let us today be like that lump of clay in the hands of Potter, our God, and be open to how we're being called today to a new understanding of how we are called in life to mission with God. Thank you. What I'd like to begin with, in this particular input, there's quite a lot of information because I'm taking you through the whole trail of the human trafficking journey, and also sharing with you how I work in this field through the foundations that I'm involved in. I'd like to begin with this, and again the same slide up, together with Hope on the Way, with a quote from Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church, and who is passionate and is totally in the leadership in this fight against human trafficking across the world, and has even set up his own networks with other faiths and bodies across the world to try and build up the momentum. His aim with the UN, as we know, we've got the UN SDGs, the Strategic Development Goals, and one of them, 8.7, is stating its mission to combat human trafficking. And Pope Francis also has declared with his networks that he desires to work with the world to combat human trafficking by 2030. So we have little time, but you do feel this gathering momentum globally to sort out why we are losing the battle to this day. And Pope Francis said that human trafficking is a wound on the body of Christ. It is a scourge against human dignity. And I think if we can possibly keep that in our minds as we go through this journey in this particular input, that it's a wound on the side of Christ and a scourge against humanity. Thanks, Matt. So here we have Jesus in the presence of the migrants, and some of you in my group, breakout, one in particular, spoke about her work with refugees. And we know that often it's those who are displaced by natural disasters, war or poverty are the biggest vulnerable prey to the work of the traffickers. They know how to operate. So we are living in a time before COVID of the greatest migration run in the whole of the history of mankind, humankind, and even more than during the first 2 world wars. And today, of course, with COVID, we're facing a different way of the traffickers working, and I'll talk about that in a while. Thank you. So we're just going to quickly look at this 2 maps, and this one just explains where the highest number of trafficked are from, so countries of origin. So the brown and the pinky, the darker red, if you like, is the highest number of trafficked from those countries that travel across the world. And if you look at the little tiny Albania there, just across the foot of Italy, you'll see that Albania is also one of the most trafficked countries of origin in the world, with the others right across through to the east. And we have parts of Africa that are also seen as high-level places of being trafficked from. And then the blue is the highest number of places of destination. So the dark blue is the very highest number of places where people would go to receive money. The traffickers, that's where they take the trafficked. And you've got Italy there because it's so close to Africa, of course. It's one of those migrant routes from Africa, and where great poverty and vulnerability is. And then you've got South America into America, and you've got right across to Australia through to the north. And we'll look then at the next slide, please, Matt. And you'll see the routes there, it's quite clear. So you've got some continents where it's internal trafficking, but it is from country to country. So if you see in South Africa is a country of destination from other African countries, but not from other parts of the world. And yet Northern Africa, you can see they're shooting off to the Middle East and into Spain, where there is huge problem, and also into Italy, right across Europe. We have many African trafficked people that we're working with, as well as from Eastern Europe through to West Europe and so on. Thank you. By the way, you will receive these PowerPoints. Everybody that's registered will receive these PowerPoints. I'm sure Matt or one of the planning committee will organise that, so that you don't need to worry too much, because you'll be able to study these for yourself later. Okay, thank you, Matt. And this is the kind of trafficking. You probably know this, but it just gives you a clear indication. This is a summary. So you've got trafficking into sexual exploitation, into forced begging, and we've mentioned this, child soldiers, you know, places like the Congo and Syria, children are being used as soldiers, and people are selling them into the arms trade, into the armies to fight. Even as young as 9 and 10 boys are being sold. You've got forced labour. They were talking about fruit picking this morning in our breakout room. Terrible what's happening in some of the salad fields in Boston, in Lincolnshire. We hear a lot of slave labour there. Also, we've heard about the Leicester horrible sweatshops during COVID, and we've heard about the cockle pickers, and we've heard about the Rochdale children into sexual exploitation. You know these stories. There've been headlines, Vietnamese coming in the back of a freezer lorry, and others coming back in the lorries and being called illegal migrants, but they were trafficked. But it's easier for the government to say they were migrants if they're alive, whereas if they're dead, they're trafficked. It's just horrendous. the manipulation of figures that is going on in every country in the world about human trafficking. We've got the removal of organs. Syria, I know of a young man who had all his male line killed in the Syrian war, and he came across with his mother and sisters, protecting them, and he had no money. He sold his kidney. He was very, very ill, and he did survive, but it was a tragic situation of abuse because he wasn't given the money. He didn't protect his sisters. He became sick. A very horrendous scenario. You've got the selling of children. I've come across a situation in Africa where 12 women were lined up, impregnated through rape, and the children that were born were sold off for organs or sold into false adoption situations. Dreadful, and a reality. And forced marriage, we have that going on all over the world, of youngsters as young as 13 being sold into illicit marriages of older men who want a slave, basically, as a wife. Thank you. And this is just indicating the numbers in Britain. So in Britain, there was in 2019, this was declared figures, 5,144 slaves sold on the market of trading in Britain into labour, sexual exploitation, all the other fields we've talked about. Altogether, there are 40 million, as we speak, people being trafficked across the world, even during COVID, and probably a bigger explosion because of online trafficking that has just gone crazy and out of control during this COVID time. So since 2019, there's been an increase of 51% from 2018 in the selling of human beings on the marketplace. Thank you. And this is just to look at the cross flow of money. You need to know that there are 3 varieties of traffickers. There's the individual, could be a family member who sells the child for sexual exploitation on the internet, or sells the child for soldier work in a war zone. Or you've got the group, the small group in a country who come together to do this trade more effectively, and they share the money around. Or you've got what's called transnational organized crime, and huge numbers of trafficked people are sold by transnational organized crime, and they are the same individuals who are selling the drugs or selling the guns, and they're now selling people. And the money is going in this terrible economy we have, through the market economy, online, hidden. It's quite shocking, the manner in which money is laundered across the world. Thank you. So where does trafficking occur? Some of you were talking about this in our group this morning. So I think you have a pretty good handle on this because it's in your news so often. The escort services is hidden. Mayfair, we are going with the police, sisters are traveling with the police and knocking on doors in Mayfair, in the most, prestigious places in London. Trafficked girls are being sold and used in high-level trafficking with government, and rich people are using them for sex, and it's quite horrendous what is happening there. We've got the truck stops, which is very common around the world, where girls are held in prisoned really, and are in dirty situations where the trackers can buy sex very easily and hidden and secret. We've got the nail bars and the online, we'll talk about that more later, hotels, and at each level the girl is going to be costing more to the buyer, and the Johns or the buyers are just getting so fat rich on the back of such a trade. I met a girl just 2 days ago who was through the John, wooed into a marriage, loved her for a couple of years, and she pretended the guy that he was in debt and she needed her to prostitute herself. So he managed to get the guys, and she was used for prostitution, and she just thought she was paying him back for his love, if you like. Now she's training to be a lawyer. She's come through everything after about 14 years. She was only 16 when it started, and she became a prostitute in the end. For survival, she managed to escape the trafficker, and now she's escaped from prostitution, and she is at university, and she is going to spend the rest of her life fighting trafficking. Thanks, Matt. So who are the traffickers? Well, we've talked a little bit about that. They could be your next door neighbor. They could be a local family. They could be very organized crime. And here we have a situation of, which we're working with in Renata at the moment, is child trafficking online, because it's the massive explosion during COVID. And this is the situation. Home is a safe place for children. No, it's not. With the internet, if parents aren't particularly careful, you've no idea what is going on. And in great poverty around the world through COVID, now families are trading their children as young as 2 years of age to be used for sex and rape, multiple, online. And who is buying this live stream sex? But the West, Europe. Europeans may be in the office. It's going on, and these children are not protected because the law, because of data protection, is actually allowing the perpetrators to get away with it. So we're having a big training on this. We're working with IGM, which is the International Justice Mission, right across the world to look at how we can collaborate to combat this. And we are actually part of a campaign with governments across Europe to get the law changed for data protection of perpetrators of this crime. Thanks, Matt. So the reality of the trafficked, I don't need to even begin probably to tell you about this, but the physical and mental impact on the trafficked that come from such deprived, very disturbed backgrounds. Usually in Albania, we know for a fact from our statistics that every single trafficked person in our shelters has come from a dysfunctional family, trafficked abroad and then deported back as probably a criminal because they were drugged and put into drug abuse by the traffickers, or because they're illegal migrants. So they're doubly abused, doubly traumatized, and unbelievably broken when they come back. So let's move on. I'm conscious of time. So the impact is massive, from the little children through to the teenagers, boys and girls. 70%, I must say, of trafficked are still noted as women and girls. 30% boys and men, mainly into labour, but also sexual exploitation. Thank you. We'll watch this film now. It's from we made it as Renata, and it's saying a little bit about, this is based in Lithuania and East Europe, and it's an interview with a trafficked person, again, trying to move you into the reality more and more.
Vienas vyras 24-5, o kitas vyras 30 metų. Kai buvau susitikus mieste, buvau susitikus savo gerą draugą, jam prisipažinau, papasakau, kad gal gali padėti. Ir tą vakarą, kai papasakau tam draugui, jis man išnuomavo viešbutį, pats išvažiavo į namus. Rytą atsikėlus jam parašiau, kad viskas gerai, manęs niekas neieškojo. Tai buvo durys užrakintos, kad aš niekur neišeičiau ir būčiau tenai iki galo, kol, pažemins ten jau iki visko.
Iš pradžio šiaip su vienu draugavau, buvo viskas gerai, o paskui įsiskyriau su juo ir pradėjo man siūlyti tokius važiuojam į užsienį, ten padirbsi, visą kitą. ten aš nesutikau, jie mane grasint pradėjo.
O ką jie tau siūlė, ką tu ten dirbsi?
Nieko nesakė, ką dirbsiu.
O tai kodėl tu nesutikai važiuoti?
Nu, nenorėjau, nežinojau, iš tikrųjų per savo pusseserę sužinojau, kas jie iš tikrųjų per žmonės yra. Ir kaip pasakė, kad iš Kučiėnų 5 merginas išvežė.
O policija jų negali įveikti?
Galėtų, bet policija net nereaguoja.
Sakyk, gerai, aš nemanau, kad policija...
Aš nemanau, kad aš policijai svarbiausia.
I always get very angry and upset and, and especially nowadays when you see all these bunches and bunches of tourists walking, it's even sadder, I think. Yeah, it's a tourist attraction nowadays.
It's dark and the weather is okay, it's not too cold.
If in Italy we have about 60, 70, 80,000 women on the street, it's because there are millions of people using them, searching for them, looking for them, using them, throwing them on the street. What do we do?
Cosa dice la strada a noi? Dice che c'è un dramma, c'è una povertà, perché queste ragazze vengono, come dire, irretite nel loro paese, perché scappano da situazioni di miseria, di povertà, dove la dignità della donna non viene valorizzata, riconosciuta. Quante ragazze, anche dall'Africa, non hanno studiato, sono state costrette già lì a fare servizi nelle case e magari i fratellini andare a scuola e loro perché donne, perché femmine non potevano andare a scuola. Quindi sono abitate anche da sogni di liberazione, di crescita della loro dignità di donne, la voglia di studiare, poi di essere di aiuto per le proprie famiglie.
My brother came to pick me up and said there is a better life in United Kingdom. I should come over. When I came, my brother did not give me my passport. He was holding my passport and said, if I obey him, everything will go fine. If I don't obey him, he will deport me to my country so that I will go and continue my suffering. He will introduce me to different people that will be giving me money. After my brother will go to work in the evening, he will call them to the house. But they were not giving me money. Actually, I think they were giving her the money on my behalf. I never knew it was prostitution.
So, you know, that just gives you a taste because Renata is Religious in Europe networking against trafficking and exploitation, as Hilary mentioned at the beginning, and we're in 31 countries. And that gave you a taste of some of our members working against human trafficking from Italy into UK. We had the Netherlands and Lithuania. And you could get a taste, if you like, of the different varieties of human trafficking from that little film. So now we're just going to look at the consequences to the person who's been trafficked on their human being, if you like, and the breaking down of their humanity. We talked at the beginning about Mary Ward and Jesus and the gospel call to freedom. And this terrible trade of human beings and the abuse of them breaks down them to being shackled and broken as a human person, which means that they have a long way and a courageous way to find themselves again. So both mental and physical impact leads to double trauma and the need to mend body and spirit. Thank you. So in our shelters in Albania, we did a research, and these are the presenting illnesses from our girls. They're all girls in our shelters in Albania. Though we do work with men, and we do have flats for men and boys. And MWiB Retro I'll speak about in a bit, but we have a day service in 6 areas of Albania to work with exploited and abused people who do not want to go in a shelter. So on the mental illness side, we have the anxiety disorder, depression, behavioral disorders, schizophrenia, epilepsy, and development disability. And that is all surrounded by trauma, post-trauma and double trauma. So we have teams of psychotherapists working little by little, and even some have to go into wards in the hospital for a time to get support from psychiatry and medication. Physical illnesses, as you can imagine, impact the internal organs because of multiple sex and rape. Also from brutal beating, they have many problems with their teeth and their whole jaw situation. They have illnesses that they've picked up in the dirty environments that many of them go in, like hepatitis and allergies that they pick up in urinary infections. And also through anxiety, they have gastrointestinal and respiratory problems, and also the eye problems are from abuse. So the drug problems, the traffickers very often drug the trafficked in order to control them when there is resistance at the beginning, which there nearly always is, and they beat them into submission. It's a most horrendous approach to control of a human being. Thank you, Matt. And this is one of our girls speaking for themselves. Freedom has somehow been out of my reach. Since a sinless baby, the freedom and many rights were taken and stepped on. Freedom is my basic human right, and I will run away as many times as I have to in order to breathe its fresh, sweet air that calms my wounded heart. And I have actually heard trafficked people say that sometimes the scenario they experienced at home was so bad that even the trafficking experience was not as bad. So to try and get away from their beginnings, if you like, is safer a risk than going back to it. And that is a very, very big problem for many of us working in the field, because home is meant to be safe. Thank you, Matt. So now we're going to move on to look at how we actually work against human trafficking in the field a little bit. And basically the philosophy, if you like, is embedded learning. So it's being sure that we know what we're doing and that we're working with others and constantly building our capacity, never feeling we know, because we don't. We have a lot to learn all the time. So both the Renata organisation and MWiB Loreto and now AMSA in Britain is constantly seeking to build capacity for its workers in order that they are in tune with the way in which the traffickers are working today, and in order to give the best support to those who've been trafficked when they're rescued. So it's learning, thinking, judging, doing, then learning again and reflecting and so on. Thank you. So this is our Renata in Europe. We have about 350 members, with many of them bringing on their networks of organisations. So there's thousands engaged in the whole network, which began 10 years ago. We have 4 trustees, of which I'm one of them. I'm the president of Renata at the moment and part of the core group. There are 5 of us in the core group from 5 different countries. And we have a working board, and on the working board are 31 individual sisters or co-workers with sisters who are representing the 31 countries in Europe in which we're engaged against human trafficking. We also have 9 task groups, And these reflect the focus we need to go into, like awareness raising, like social media, webinar, and so on, and website, like prevention, like shelter work, like I can't remember the names of them all. Film, we have events, rescue task groups, and they're based on our film festival upcoming, and an assembly which we have in Portugal, and that's upcoming, and so on. We have many collaborators and partners, 350 something partners around the world that we work with to combat human trafficking, and the 31 country groups who meet in their countries, and Renata supports their development according to where they discern they need that support. Thanks, Matt. And these are the main areas of our work. So 71% of our membership work in direct action. And as you see, 58.80% work in advocacy and lobbying. So, you know, many are working across the field of the work that's needed. At the moment, Renata is conducting research with St Mary's University in London on legal aid and the availability of legal aid for trafficked people, which is absolutely abominable in UK. It's absolutely disgusting the way they've reduced legal aid for vulnerable people. And so we're doing a research to bring about the knowledge of this and to campaign about it. But we're doing it in 6 countries, in Portugal, in Spain, in Germany, in England, in Albania, Romania, and Bulgaria. And we'll launch all of these researches. We've done about 6 now on our website for you to read if you wish to find out more about what's going on across Europe. Thanks, please. And this is just to show you a little advert about our film festival. If you've got children, young people between the age of 16 and 24 who would like to make a little film on human trafficking, then please go to our renataevents.net website. We've 2 websites, and on that they can enter into the competition, and they've still got time till August to make their little film. And they win if they won, there were 3 winners, they will receive £2,000 to use in the field as they wish for social justice. And so they go down to 500, the winners, but a very great opportunity to get young people engaged against human trafficking. Thank you, Matt. And this is Mary Ward Loretto. This is focused in Albania, and you'll see in this organogram, we have 6 advice. We now work in self-managing teams. I've stepped back from the leadership of that. I'm on the board and president, but I don't run it like I used to as CEO. So this is them running the work themselves. We have wonderful Albanian staff, very professional psychologists, social workers and lawyers who run these 6 centres, advice and service, working with exploited and abused people in each of these vulnerable areas of Albania. We also have self-managing teams that run the programmes, that run the development, and are an executive team. And this is just showing you a kaleidoscope of pictures of this amazing work. And in COVID, of course, you can see one of the pictures, we've had to move into emergency feeding, which we've never done before, but our people who've been trafficked, they will be re-trafficked if they can't have food, if they don't get food on their table and the medical provisions they need if they have COVID. And nearly all of our staff have had COVID, and most of the people in Albania have got COVID during time. It's getting lower at the moment, which is wonderful. So a lot of shifts and you know, trying to discern what's the most greatest need of the time that we're living in. Thanks, Matt. And this is some of our research done both in Albania and indeed the one beyond board is about safe migration and the problem of thousands of Albanians wanting to leave the country because of its dastardly systems of government and the post-communist poverty and lack of opportunity, terrible unemployment. And that's a really wonderful research to read on our website, www.albaniahope.com. And the other two are produced by our Renata network, which are also very useful because both focus on UK. So you'll get one chapter on the UK and the research done about child trafficking in UK, and also mapping in general of anti-trafficking. Thank you. And why is there human trafficking? Well, this is something I'll be looking at in the causes later in greater depth, but it is that we have a very, very unjust economy globally of neoliberalism, which is being spoken against, against even at the IMF level. Christine Lagarde spoke very strongly about the problem of the growing huge gap between the rich and the poor by this form of trading, and the manner in which free trade is disenabling democracies to function properly, and so on. So the economy is a big, big problem, and it's easy for the traffickers to operate within it. We've got the whole problem of the lack of security in the dark web and the internet itself, which we've spoken about. We've got the whole problem of demand and greed, and the lack of fair trade, the lack of proper justice in the trains, the labour trains. The supply chains is the word I want. The supply chains down the line of the corporates operating in our world. Terrible, terrible wages, terrible conditions, and slave labour hidden. That's what we would say. Also, demand for sex by the men and patriarchy is a massive, massive reason for human trafficking. Patriarchy is strong in our world everywhere still, and it has to be addressed, and honestly addressed, and not pretending that women have human rights, because basically they don't anywhere in the world, and some much less than others. Thank you, Matt. And so this is the last slide. We go with Greta. I like the way she speaks. She's a lonely voice crying in the wilderness sometimes. But what she says is, once we start to act, hope is everywhere. And I really believe that. And Jesus led the way. You know, he was a reformer and an activist. He died for it from pure love. And I think that's our call. Thank you. I think that's the last one, isn't it, Matt? I think. Oh, no. Okay. So we're in collaboration. This is it, of course. Yes. And we go together. And this is, we end with the words of Pope Francis, you know, all creatures are connected. Each must be cherished with love and respect. As living creatures, we are dependent on one another. Each area is responsible for the care of this family.